فرأس العلم تقوى الله حقا وليس بأن يقال لقد رأست.
نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة، خلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد. To proceed, best of speech is the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal, and the best of guidance is the guidance of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the worst of all affairs are those affairs that have newly been added into the religion. Every newly added affair in the religion is an innovation, and every innovation is a misguidance, and every misguidance is in the fire of hell. By the praise of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, we continue our reading and commentary tonight from the tremendous treatise written by Al-Imam Abdurrahman ibn Nasir ibn Sa'di, titled فوائد مستنبطة من قصة Yusuf, benefits derived from the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. We reached up to the verse where the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, mentioned the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَكَذَلِكَ يَجْتَبِيكَ رَبُّكَ وَيُعَلِّمُكَ مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ وَيُتِمُّ نِعْمَتَهُ عَلَيْكَ وعلى آل يعقوب كما أتمها على أبويك من قبل إبراهيم وإسحاق إن ربك عليم حكيم. We mentioned that there are a number of benefits we found in this statement of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. So we ask Allah Jalla wa Ala for help and aid in extracting these benefits and putting them into practice. Number one, he mentioned to his son Yusuf alayhi salam that his Lord shall choose him, and that his Lord shall teach him from the interpretation of speech. Shaykh al-Sa'di, may Allah have mercy upon him, in his book At-Tafsir, Tafsir al-Karim al-Rahman, he mentioned meaning, the interpretation of dreams, and the understanding of what they shall result in, and what is the end result of those dreams. And the clarification of what every truthful speech will end up with. What is the end result of every truthful speech? He said, such as the divine revelations and their likes. In other words, Yusuf will be given understanding. He will be given the ability to take apart words and delve into their meanings. He said, وَيُتِمُّ نِعْمَتَهُ عَلَيْكَ, He will perfect His ni'mah upon you. وَعَلَى آلِ يَعْقُوبَ, and upon the family of Yaqub. The word ni'mah is singular or plural. This is an important question, because from this question we can learn a principle from the principles of tafsir. And that principle is related to whether this is plural or singular. If you said this is singular, ni'mah, this is correct. However, it is a ni'mah that is attributed to Allah. Ni'matahu وَيُتِمُّ ni'matahu, His blessing. He will complete His favor, His blessing upon you. And the principle of tafsir states, المفرد إذا أضيف عم. When a singular word is attributed, then it indicates generality. So, in other words, this is as strong as saying that He will complete all His blessings upon you. And what is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will complete His blessings upon slave? Obviously, the answer is He will be made into a prophet. There is no higher blessing, there is no greater favor from the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that can be bestowed in any human than to be chosen and made into a prophet. And this meaning is further corroborated because his father then proceeded to say, كَمَا أَتَمَّهَا عَلَى أَبَوَيْكَ مِنْ قَبْلُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْحَاقَ, just as he perfected it and completed it upon your two fathers from before, Ibrahim and Ishaq. Ishaq is Yusuf's grandfather. Ibrahim is his great-grandfather. And how did both of them receive the completion and the perfection of Allah's blessings? They were both made into prophets. So basically, Yaqub told him that he shall be made into a prophet. Now, notice that he said he will complete his ni'mah upon you and upon the family of Yaqub. Why is that? Because once a man becomes so favored by Allah Azza wa Jal, then the amenities and blessings he will enjoy will by default automatically extend to those that are around him. If someone is blessed, his blessings will extend to those who are around him by the mercy of Allah Barak wa Ta'ala. In other words, Yusuf shall prove to be a blessing not only for his own self, but he shall prove to be a blessing upon the entirety of his family. Then he finished by saying, Inna rabbaka alimun hakim. Indeed, your Lord is all-knowing, most wise. Your Lord is all-knowing. He knows exactly who deserves these tremendous blessings, most wise, and where to put his blessings in, Azza wa Jal, for the best of outcomes. Based on this, we can see that Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam actually interpreted the dream. He gave Yusuf the steps that would lead to the outcome, and he also explained what the outcome is. The outcome is that Allah will choose you, you will be taught the interpretation of speech, and you will be chosen, and the blessing of Allah will be completed upon you. In other words, you become a prophet just as your fathers before you, Ishaq and Ibrahim, were prophets. And by the way, as a side benefit, we have a hadith that clarifies that this is the most noble of all lineages amongst mankind. What is that lineage? It is Yusuf, the Prophet of Allah, son of Yaqub, the Prophet of Allah, the son of Ishaq, the Prophet of Allah, the son of Ibrahim, the Khalil of Allah. There is no lineage in the history of mankind more noble, more lofty than that lineage. The author says, يعني لابد أن يتم الله عليك نعمته بتعليم العلوم النافعة والأعمال الصالحة والاجتباء من الله وحصول الأخلاق الجميلة والمقامات الجليلة. In other words, it is a must that Allah will complete His blessing upon you by teaching you beneficial knowledge, righteous deeds, being chosen by Allah, and the attainment of noble characteristics and lofty stations. فبشره بحصول هذه الأمور ثم بالوصول إلى الرفعة في الدنيا والآخرة. So he gave him the glad tidings that all of these things shall occur and that he shall be raised both in the dunya and in the hereafter. In other words, this dream is of the type that is al-mubashirat, glad tidings. Mubashirat, we explained, is a type of the dreams, and it is the glad tidings, good news. It is Allah Azza wa Jal informing a slave of good things that are to occur in the future. But there is another element to this dream. And what is that element? It is a tasliyah. Tasliyah is consolation. Just like you console someone at times of hardship, there is consolation in this. Why? Because never does a slave attain such a high rank with Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala except that they must be tested. In the hadith narrated by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, أَشَدُّ النَّاسِ بَلَاءً الْأَنْبِيَاء ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلُ فَالْأَمْثَلُ. People who have the most severe of tests are the prophets, and then those who are next in uprightness, followed by those who are next in uprightness. In other words, the more upright a slave is, the more severe the tests, the more difficult the tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place in their path. As such, Yusuf is both being warned of the tests that are ahead of him on the path to Allah and consoled. No matter how difficult things will become, there will come a time where you will look back and see that all these tests were steps that you had to ascend, you had to climb to get to where you end up getting. This is a consolation. Shaykh explains this further. He says, في ضمن هذا التعبير من يعقوب ليوسف بشارة له وتسهيل. And included in this interpretation given by Yaqub for Yusuf is the glad tidings and the consolation for that لما سيناله من المشقات والكروب مع إخوته وفي السجن, for that which he's going to face in terms of difficulties and hardships with his brothers and in prison. فإن من علم أن المكاره والمشقات تفضي إلى الخير والراحات تسلى وهانت عليه مشقتها سهلت عليه وطأتها حصل بذلك من اللطف والروح شيء عظيم. He said, for indeed, whoever knows that difficulties and hardship are the pathways that lead to good, to ease, and rest, he will become consoled by that, and the difficulty will lessen, and the burden will become lighter. And because of this knowledge, a great amount of relief and ease will be experienced. هذا من جملة اللطف الذي أشار إليه يوسف في قوله إن ربي لطيف لما يشاء. And this is part of the lutf that Yusuf referred to in his statement, indeed my Lord is latif towards whatever he wants. Latif is from the names of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And from the best of explanations that were given for the meaning of that name is that which is found in the words of Al-Imam Ibn Al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, where he said, وهو اللطيف بعبده ولعبده واللطف في أسمائه نوعان إدراك أسرار الأمور بخبرة واللطف عند مواقع الإحسان. Basically, he explains that the name of Allah, Al-Latif, contains two meanings, two descriptions, two attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One related to the knowledge of Allah, where Allah Azza wa Jal is most intimately acquainted with the secret knowledge of everything, the most hidden of knowledge. Allah Azza wa Jal is most intimately acquainted with it. He knows everything down to the minutest details. This is one of the meanings of the name Al-Latif. The other meaning, he said, Al-Lutfu عند مواقع الإحسان, that Allah will deliver with great subtlety the blessings that He wants to deliver to His slave. Meaning that many of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala arrive without much fanfare, without much celebration, without any big miracles or the skies tearing apart and the angels descending down from the heavens to deliver these blessings. In fact, many of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala occur right under people's noses while they are unaware that the blessings of Allah are descending. اللطف عند مواقع الإحسان. It appears the second meaning is exactly what Yusuf was referring to when he said, إِنَّ رَبِّي لَطِيفٌ لِمَا يَشَاءُ. This is from verse 100 in Surah Yusuf. In other words, after the story had almost finished, after his family had been reunited and his brothers had repented, he said, indeed, my Lord is latif to whatever He wants to accomplish. In other words, Allah very subtly delivered all of us to the point that we are in today. هذا من مقتضى حكمة الله أن المراتب العاليات لا تنال إلا بالوسائل الجليلة ولهذا قال إن ربك عليم حكيم. The Shaykh said, and this is from what is necessitated by the wisdom of Allah, that lofty ranks cannot be attained except by great means such as great tests, great knowledge, righteousness, ihsan, being trialed, going through great difficulties with patience, with ihsan, and then you attain lofty stations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is for this reason He said, indeed, your Lord is all-knowing, most wise. Then He goes on to say, ومن فوائد هذا التعبير لرؤيا يوسف بشارة عظيمة ليعقوب وأم يوسف وإخوته بحصول الرفعة والصلاح والخير. And from the benefits of this interpretation of the dream, the interpretation of this dream of Yusuf, is that it contains glad tidings, tremendous glad tidings for Yaqub himself, for Yusuf's mother, and for his siblings. That they shall all be elevated, righteous, and upon goodness. Let's pause here for a second and ponder, where did the author take this from? Where is this found in the dream itself or in its interpretation? In the dream itself, we have a number of symbols. One of them is the 11 planets that made sujood for Yusuf. Heavenly bodies. You look at the sky and you see them. They're very bright and beautiful. His brothers were 11. Then we have another symbol, and that is the sun and the moon, which revolve around the earth. The earth revolves around them. In other words, these are symbols for his family members. The father and the mother, the sun and the moon. The child revolves around them and they revolve around him. Then the 11 siblings that are also in their own orbit related to that child. From this we learn that each of them is very high because all of these heavenly bodies are in the sky. They're very raised. We also learn that they are emitting light. Brightest one of them is the sun. This is a befitting symbol for Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam, being that he is a prophet. And the prophets receive the light from Allah Azza wa Jal. In other words, the revelation of Allah Jalla wa Ala, which is also described as light. كَذَلِكَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ رُوحًا مِّنْ أَمْرِنَا. Allah Azza wa Jal has called the revelation many descriptions. One of them is ruh, soul, it brings life. Another description was light. وَلَكِنْ جَعَلْنَاهُ نُورًا. However, we made it a light, meaning the revelation of Allah. So it is befitting that his father would be the sun and his mother would be the moon and his brethren, his siblings would be the 11 planets. So we learn from this that they are all going to have high station, high rank, that they are all going to have some measure of light and knowledge and righteousness that is bestowed upon them by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. In other words, from this dream, we already know that whatever wrong is done by Yusuf's brothers, temporary, there will come a time in which they will repent to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. They will rectify their affair. This teaches us something. First of all, is this point clear? And I can move on to the next point? Or should I clarify this any further? Seems that today, all right. So if this is clear, what comes after that is to take into consideration that what counts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is having a beautiful ending, even if the beginnings are not so perfect. What counts with Allah Azza wa Jal is having a beautiful ending, even if the beginnings are not so perfect. If we understood from the interpretation of the dream that the representation of Yusuf's family is heavenly bodies, planets, sun, moon. In other words, they're all emitting light. They're all in a very high place in the heavens. In other words, Allah will raise them, and they shall benefit, and they shall have good deeds, and they will have rank with Allah, and they will have rank in knowledge. This tells us that Yusuf's brothers shall attain the station. But then how do we combine between that and the fact that they're going to sin? They're going to betray their father, and they're going to throw their brother in a well and severely transgress against Yusuf. Combination is, what this means is that this shall be a temporary phase in their lives. That sinful phase is temporary. Their end is going to be a righteous ending. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, further highlighting the importance of this concept, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالِ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ. Surely deeds are by their closures. Surely deeds are by their closures. So this is what matters with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A beautiful ending, even in spite of having a not so perfect beginning. The author then continues and he says, فَيَعْقُوبُ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ مِنْ أَكَابِرِ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَأَفَاضِلِ الْأَصْفِيَاءِ. So Yaqub alayhi salatu wassalam is from the major prophets, the most virtuous of the chosen of Allah. وَأُمُّهُ لَهَا مِنَ الْخَيْرِ وَالصَّلَاحِ وَالرِّفْعِ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. And Yusuf's mother has goodness and righteousness and elevation in the dunya and the akhirah, such that she was likened to the sun. Yani the symbol that represents his mother was the sun. Then he said, Awil Qamar, or the moon, depending on which of the two opinions you take. So this is one opinion, what we just mentioned, that Yaqub would be the sun. The sun would be the representation of Yaqub, and the moon would be the representation of the mother. This is based upon light. Based upon what? Light. The one with the greater light would be the one with the greater knowledge and station with Allah. Also, the moon reflects the light of the sun. So this is befitting that the wife would be learning from her husband. The other opinion is based upon linguistics, because ash-shams in the Arabic language is treated as a feminine. You don't say هذا الشمس, you say هذه الشمس. So you treat it as a feminine word. And as for the qamar, you treat it as a masculine word. You don't say هذه القمر, you say هذا القمر. So the qamar is treated as a masculine word, wash-shams is treated as a feminine word. So this is a linguistic interpretation of these symbols based upon a rule from the language of the Arabs. This is an accepted method of the interpretation of dreams. وإخوة يوسف وإن كان قد جرى منهم في حق أبيهم وأخيهم من الأذية والعقوق والقطيعة ما جرى ولكن أباهم وأخاهم عفيا عنهم. And the brothers of Yusuf, despite what has occurred from them in terms of the rights of their father and their brother, of harm, cutting the ties of kin, and mistreatment, whatever occurred. However, their father and their brother have both forgiven them. Astaghfar Allah Ta'ala Arhamar Rahimin. And they asked Allah to forgive them, the most merciful, Jalla wa Ala. Now, just as a side point, in one of the copies, we have في حق أباهم وأخاهم. If you have that typo, you can fix it. In this paragraph, وإخوة يوسف وإن كان قد جرى منهم في حق أباهم وأخاهم. If you have that typo, you can fix it. في حق أبيهم وأخيهم. This is how it should read. أباهم and أخاهم is wrong. It's a mistake. He said فالشمس والقمر والنجوم تضمنت النور والارتفاع. So the sun and the moon and the stars contain the meaning of light, loftiness, station. ولكنها متفاوتة في نورها بحسب التفاوت بين الأبوين وبين الإخوة. However, the amount of light they emit is different based upon the difference in rank between the two parents and the siblings. الحاصل أن هذه الرؤيا تضمنت ما حصل ليوسف صلى الله عليه وسلم من خير الدنيا والآخرة والمقامات العظيمة والوسائل والمنن التي أوردتها هذه الأمور وما حصل لأبويه وإخوته من مشاركته في خير الدنيا والآخرة والله تعالى أعلم. So, in summary, this dream contains what is going to happen to Yusuf of the good of this dunya and the akhirah, and the tremendous patience and the means to them, the blessings that all of these things shall lead to, that which is going to happen to his two parents and his siblings, and that they will share in the blessings of the dunya and the akhirah, and Allah knows best. This leads us to a final point before we move on to the next segment. That is, notice how Yusuf's blessing was shared by his family. It wasn't exclusive to him. They benefited from his station. You can see it in the dream that they made sujood to him, and then it transpired in real life in the end of the story. They made sujood for him physically. They glorified him, and he welcomed them and shared his blessings with them. And this teaches us a concept that if you want to be someone so blessed that your blessings reach your family, if you want to be someone who does the greatest possible favor for your family members, for your parents, for your siblings, for your children, for your wives, then what you want to do is to seek this knowledge, the knowledge of how to come close to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, how to ascend in the ranks of the worshippers. This is the guaranteed path that leads to a person becoming blessed, such that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not only bless them, but bless those around them. We ask Allah Jalla wa Ala from His bounties. الفصل الأول, chapter 1. وأما رؤيا الفتيين. And as for the dream of the two young men. As you can see, the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, he skipped from one dream to the next dream, verses going in chronological order of the actual events of the story of Yusuf. So basically, the author is organizing the benefits in this treatise based upon a particular order that he saw fit, verses following the order that is found in the story of Yusuf as it is found. For this reason, I want to briefly mention a synopsis of that story. The story goes, after he saw his dream, his father warned him not to tell his dream to his brothers. Despite that, his brothers still plotted against him and managed to deceive their father and convince him to take Yusuf for an outing. And then they got rid of Yusuf by throwing him into a well. He was found by some travelers, and they took him and they sold him in exchange for a measly amount of money. Yusuf was sold as a slave, was taken into the household of one of the men of government of Egypt. He was raised in that home in the best of manners, in the best of ways. He was raised in an atmosphere, in an environment that allowed him to reach the perfection that a human can reach in terms of character, development, and knowledge. Indeed, the man who purchased him saw so much good in him from day one that he was hoping that potentially maybe one day I will adopt him and make him my son. He said to his wife on the day that he brought him home. So that was a segue for what Allah Azza wa Jal had in store for Yusuf, that he was raised in that fashion. However, when he reached the strength of men and the virility of youth, Allah Azza wa Jal bestowed upon him a tremendous amount of beauty. The Prophet ﷺ, describing that beauty, he said, أُوتِيَ شَطْرَ الْحُسْنِ, or as he said, that Yusuf was given half of all the beauty. As you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He distributed the beauty amongst mankind, there was a set amount of beauty to be distributed amongst the creation, amongst mankind, the men and the women, the children of Adam. When Allah distributed the beauty, one half of it was distributed amongst all of us. One half of it was distributed amongst all of us. Some got more and some got less. The other half, in its entirety, was given to Yusuf. There are many lessons in that particular blessing that Allah Azza wa Jal has given Yusuf. We shall see some of them, inshallah, as we keep going on in this story. Point is, as he grew older, he grew more beautiful, and he became a fitna for this woman. Although he is her slave, normally a woman would not be attracted to a slave. Nonetheless, she attempted to seduce him, but Allah Jalla wa Ala gave him firmness, and he was saved from her attempts to lure him towards sin. Then she attempted to frame him when her husband saw her and him both looking out of sorts, because Yusuf was running away from her, and she was running after him, and she managed to tear some of his clothes off of his back. But when her husband saw this situation, to save herself, she attempted to frame Yusuf and pretend that he was attempting to harm her. Allah Jalla wa Ala defended Yusuf at that moment. Nonetheless, they decided to imprison him. Yusuf was imprisoned wrongfully for years. And then Allah Jalla wa Ala, when the time came, cleared his name, released him from prison, and he was immediately catapulted into a lofty station in government. It is at that point that the story begins to take a turn for victory after years and years of trials and dedication and worship, work for Allah. It is at that point in the story that his brothers began to visit him, because he was in charge of the dissemination and distribution of the grains, basically food from Egypt, to whoever was coming by to trade with the Egyptians. His brothers were from amongst his customers. However, they did not recognize him. So he managed to get his other brother from them, his younger brother, who was also oppressed just like Yusuf. And then, eventually, they came to him in a saddened state, seemingly broken. It is at that point that he decided to reveal his identity. And they all acknowledged at that point that certainly Allah has favored you above us and has chosen you over us. They all admitted that Yusuf is superior to them, and the jealousy ended right there as they submitted to the choice of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Meanwhile, his father had lost his eyesight. So Yusuf sent a garment of his with them, and when that garment was thrown on his father's face, his eyesight returned, And he instructed them, bring forth all your families, come to me. So they all moved to Egypt and settled with Yusuf. The families was reunited, and the work of the devil was undone by the praise of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. This is a synopsis. This is an overall view of the story. Why am I mentioning this? Because the Shaykh is going to follow his own order in mentioning the benefits of this story. And you are best served by at least knowing the overall structure of the story in order to see where these benefits fit, how they align together as the Shaykh explains them, because he's not going to follow the chronological order of the progress of this story. With that being said, he said, and as for the dream of the two young men, حيث قال أحدهما إني أراني أعصر خمرا قال الآخر إني أراني أحمل فوق رأسي خبزا تأكل الطير منه نبئنا بتأويله إنا نراك من المحسنين. And as for the dream of the two young men, where one of them said, I see myself squeezing alcohol, and the other said, I see myself carrying over my head bread from which birds are eating, inform us of its interpretation. Indeed, we are of the opinion that you are from the muhsineen, from the people of graciousness, people of extreme goodness. The author comments, he said, فَتَلَطَّفُوا لِيُوسُف أن ينبئهما بتأويل رؤياهما بما شاهدوا من إحسانه للأشياء وإحسانه إلى الخلق. So they used a nice method of requesting from Yusuf to interpret both their dreams because of what they have seen from his graciousness, his goodness to all things, and graciousness and goodness to all creation. Now, there's a couple of points to be taken from this verse here. Number one, they said to him, Inna naraka min al-muhsinin. It is our opinion that you are from the muhsinin. This is a lesson for us. That if you appear to be from the righteous, expect that people will notice it. People will look at you. People will judge Islam based upon your behavior. If you appear to be from the righteous, you have a greater responsibility now to avoid everything that could potentially tarnish the image of Islam. Because people are going to look at the deen through the lens of your actions. So whatever you do may affect the reputation of Islam. Number two, that if a person is in the minds of the people from the people of Ihsan, he's from the gracious, he's from the kind, from the generous, from the brave, from the people of worship, immediately they assume that you have knowledge. And this is similar to the story of the man who killed 99 people and then asked to be led to a scholar. They led him to a worshipper. Because in the minds of the common folk, you're not going to be a worshipper until you have knowledge. They do not always have the ability to differentiate between worshippers upon ignorance and worshippers upon knowledge. So it is assumed that a person of ihsan is immediately a person of knowledge. So they came to Yusuf with a question that requires great knowledge, which is how to interpret their dreams, simply because they saw his ihsan. So if you are in that station, then expect that people will come to you with their questions. And if you know yourself to be unable to meet that requirement, meaning you don't have the prerequisite knowledge to answer their questions, then you should also be ready. You should be ready for people coming to you and asking you questions because they see your worship, they see your good manners, they see that your adherence to the sunnah. Be ready with two words, Allahu A'lam, or another two words, La Adri, or another two words, La A'lam, I don't know, or Allah knows better. Be ready because otherwise you could end up speaking about Allah Azza wa Jalla and about the religion without knowledge, and thus harming yourself and harming others. And as for Yusuf, they were very fortunate in the fact that indeed he was from the carriers of knowledge. And notice another thing here, how they both use the verb arani, inni arani. قال أحدهما إني أراني وقال الآخر إني أراني. Arani is what kind of verb? I want the students of the Arabic language to share with us from that which they know. Verbs are three types. Which of the types of verbs is the verb arani? The reason I'm asking this question is because we all know the context. So the choice of verb would lead us to exploring a benefit that perhaps requires a little bit more pondering to understand. So what kind of verb is this? First of all, what are the um, types of verbs? Three types of verbs. Santum, those who said فعل مضارع, this is correct. ماضي, مضارع, أمر. ماضي is past tense. مضارع, present. أمر is related to making a request or a command or a verb to occur in the future, an action to occur in the future, a request or an action to be taken in the future, past, present, and future. This particular verb, arani, I see myself, indicates the present, indicates continuity. Why would such a verb be used to describe a past event? They both saw the dream already. Why are they describing it using a present tense verb? There are two possibilities that I see here. If any of you want to share with us what you have, go ahead. Let's get the benefit, inshallah. One of the possibilities I see here is that the dream was being repeated. Each of them saw the dream multiple times. This is something that actually is fairly common. That a person will see a dream and they will not make much of it till they see it a second time or a third time, and then they become concerned and they're like, okay, maybe there's something here that must be interpreted. So they take it to someone who is knowledgeable in the discipline of the interpretation of dreams. The more a person sees the same dream, the heavier it becomes on their mind, and the greater weight it carries in their heart. And so they put in the effort to go and seek its interpretation. So this is one possibility. Another possibility is that it is as if they are saying, I see it now, meaning the dream was so vivid, so real, so tangible. I'm describing it to you as if I can see it right now in front of my eyes. It is playing out right now in front of my eyes. I'm telling you the dream as if I'm seeing it right now. And this is actually a common usage in the Arabic language. When someone says, I see, whilst they're talking about something they saw, it means that it is very vivid and real. It is as if it's happening right now. And this is common, not just with the verb I see. Generally, with any affair of the past being described with the present, it means that the person is experiencing it right now as if it had just happened. So with that being said, both of these dreams were heavy on the minds of these two young men. Notice how they said to him, Inna naraka min al-muhsinin. It is our opinion that you are from the muhsinin. In other words, they used kind speech and good manners to request knowledge. And this is actually one of the keys to success in the field of seeking knowledge, to use kind speech when addressing your teacher. Address someone that has knowledge with kindness is to unlock the vault of knowledge that they are carrying. It is known that some people withheld knowledge from students because the students had bad manners. There's a famous story mentioned about one of the Sahaba who two men used to treat him differently. One of them used to treat him with kindness and proper manners, so he used to share his knowledge with him. And the other used to treat him in a manner that was less than ideal, so he would withhold his knowledge from him. This is human nature. If you want to be taught, then you have to treat the person who carries knowledge with kindness, with mercy, with respect. or they are far more likely to share what they know with you based on your treatment of them. Then the Sheikh said, ففسر رؤيا من رأى أنه يعصر خمرا أنه ينجو من سجنه ويعود إلى مرتبته وخدمته لسيده ويعصر له العنب الذي يؤول إلى الخمر. فسر الرؤيا الآخر بأنه يقتل ثم يصلب فتأكل الطير من رأسه. So he interpreted the dream of the one who saw himself squeezing alcohol, that he's going to escape from prison, meaning he's going to be freed, and that he's going to go back to his previous job, serving his master, and he will squeeze grapes that eventually will be turned into alcohol, into wine. And he interpreted the dream of the other, that he's going to be killed, and then he's going to be put on a cross, he's going to be crucified, and then the birds will come and eat from his head. The Sheikh said, فَالْأَوَّلُ رُؤْيَاهُ جَاءَتْ عَلَى وَجْهِ الْحَقِيقَةِ. For the first of them, his vision was in the form of reality. In other words, the dream itself is the interpretation. It doesn't need a lot of interpretation and figuring out what the symbols are. So this is one of the types of interpretations the Sheikh had mentioned when he was talking about the fundamentals. He said, وَالْآخَرُ رُؤْيَاهُ جَاءَتْ عَلَى وَجْهِ الْمِثَالِ. And as for the other one, his dream came in the form of symbols. وَأَنَّهُ يُقْتَلْ, that he's going to be killed. وَمَعْ قَتْلِهِ يُصْلَبْ, not only killed but also crucified. وَلَا يُدْفَنْ. Furthermore, he's not going to be buried. He's going to be left out for a while. حَتَّى تَأْكُلُ الطُّيُورُ مِنْ رَأْسِهِ, to the point that the birds will come and eat from his head. وهذا من الفهم العجيب والغوص إلى المعاني الدقيقة. And this is from the most amazing of understanding and diving deeply into the most subtle of meanings. The Sheikh explains, he says, وذلك أن العادة أن المقتول يدفن في الحال ولا تتمكن السباع والطيور من الأكل منه. فهم أن هذا سيقتل ولا يدفن سريعا حتى يصل إلى هذه الحال. هذا من فضيحته وخزيته وسوء مصيره الدنيوي ما تقشعر منه الجلود. And this is because the habit is that a person who is killed is immediately buried, and birds and beasts cannot come to eat from him. So he understood from this dream that this man is going to be killed and he will not be buried quickly until he gets to this point. And this includes that he's going to be facing a scandal and something that will wreck his reputation, and that he is going to end up with a very bad ending in terms of the dunya, something that is enough to make skins crawl. وحيث علم أن هذه الرؤيا صحيحة لا بد من وقوعها قال لهما قضي الأمر الذي فيه تستفتيان. Because he knew that this is a true vision and it must occur, he said to the both of them, the affair in which you are seeking fatwa has been sealed, has been ruled upon. In other words, Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam was not engaging in guesswork. Rather, he was telling what the revelation of Allah contains. In other words, Yusuf could recognize that this is the truth that has come from Allah in these dreams, and he interpreted based upon what it actually means. And then he finished the interpretation by saying, and this is exactly what will happen. This is a matter that is sealed. This is taken directly from the preserved tablet, from the qadr of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Shaykh comments on this. He says, وَهَذَا مِنْ كَمَالِ عِلْمِهِ لِلتَّعْبِيرِ الَّذِي لَا يُعَبِّرُ عَنْ ظَنٍّ. And this is because of the perfection and mastery of the knowledge of the interpretation of dreams, where he is not interpreting based upon guesses, based upon what he thinks, وَتَوَهُّمْ وَإِنَّمَا يُعَبِّرُ عَنْ عِلْمٍ وَيَقِينٍ. Rather, he interprets based upon knowledge and certainty. وَأَمَّا الْمُنَاسَبَةُ فِي ذَلِكَ. And as for the munasaba, what is related to this, is أن الطيور لا تقرب الحي, that birds do not come next to the living. وإنما تتناول الميت إذا لم يكن عنده أحد. Rather, they come to the dead when there's nobody around. وهذا ما إنما يكون بعد قتله وصلبه. This is something that only occurs after he is killed and put on a cross, put on a piece of wood. He's hung out in public for a long time. Nobody's around the body. This is the time at which birds feel comfortable enough to come and eat. This is how Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, or rather, these are some of the symbols by which Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam was able to decipher and interpret these dreams. This is amazing. This is amazing. Now, notice that Yusuf called the interpretation of the dream a fatwa. He said, الَّذِي فِيهِ تَسْتَفْتِيَانِ, called it a fatwa. And what this means is that it must be treated like a fatwa. No one should attempt to interpret a dream in the absence of knowledge, just as they will never dare to issue a ruling on a topic of the religion that they have no knowledge of. Say you got a question about divorce or a question about inheritance and you have not learned these rulings. Would you dare and give an answer on either of these two topics without the knowledge? The answer is obviously no. Likewise, the dreams should be treated the same way. Now, there's something here that should be highlighted. How in the prison, Yusuf was described as from the muhsineen by these two young men. And this is very interesting because many people, when they are in prison, they enter a state of sadness and depression. They enter a state of loss of hope. And so they cannot maintain the standard of worship that is required to be from the muhsineen. Not so in the case of Yusuf. Yusuf was from the muhsineen in prison. Despite all the hardship and difficulty, the harsh conditions of prison life, he maintained that standard. He was still able to meet the criteria to be immediately recognized as from the muhsineen. What is even more amazing is that when his brothers came to him in the palace, after he became a man of government, a leader in society, they also said to him while pleading their case in front of him, Inna naraka min al-muhsinin. The exact same phrase that was said to him in prison was said to him in the palace. This is also amazing because it shows that Yusuf was not changed by wealth, was not changed by power, was not changed by status, was not changed by fame. Rather, he maintained the same standard of worship, humility to Allah, Baraka wa Ta'ala, such that he could immediately be recognized to be from the muhsineen, despite the fact that he was a man in power, in station, in wealth. And this shows us something very critical, something very important, and that is al-ihsan is a level that you never want to step away from, regardless of what your fate contains. Twists and turns of life that are written for you but never change or move you past the station of al-ihsan. This is a station that if you are successful enough to reach, you should stick to it. Never leave it. And this is proof that Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam was chosen by Allah for good reason. His Lord knew this is a slave that will maintain al-ihsan, regardless of what Allah Azza wa Jal tests him with. He passed all his tests with flying colors. The Shaykh then mentions a benefit related to how Yusuf interpreted the dream. And it requires a little bit of detail and explanation. So we're going to leave this for the next class, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. It is a tremendous benefit related to al-aqidah, the correct belief, sound belief system of the Muslimin, taken directly from the mouth of one of the greatest of the prophets of Allah, the Prophet Yusuf. It is also a benefit related to ad-da'wah, how to call to Allah, Jalla wa ala, how to take advantage of situations and opportunities that present themselves to you so that you can be a caller to Allah in all circumstances. And it shows us, this benefit shows us where the heart of the caller to Allah lies. Where are his concerns? What are the things that are drawing his attention and concerning him? And what is he thinking about? This benefit contains the breakdown of the methodology of da'wah and what is okay to say and what is not okay to say. amongst many other benefits to be found. بإذن ta'ala, all of that we will save for our next class. بإذن ta'ala. And we conclude with this. والله جل وعلا نسأل أن ينفعنا جميعا بما علمنا وأن يعلمنا ما ينفعنا وأن يزيدنا علما. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم إنا نسألك من الخير كله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم، ونعوذ بك من الشر كله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على عبدك ونبيك محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك، نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت، نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.